Hello, my name's Michelle Herzog. I'm the History Social Science Consultant here at the Los Angeles County Office of Education and the Director of the California Democracy School Civic Learning Initiative. The California Democracy School Initiative was funded by the S.D. Bechtel Jr. Foundation and is directed by the Los Angeles County Office of Education in partnership with the Los Angeles County Education Foundation. The goal of the initiative is to institutionalize civic inquiry and investigative practices in high schools to prepare all students for college, career, and citizenship in the 21st century. The initiative engages 10 high schools in Los Angeles County and 2 high schools in Orange County to work as professional learning communities to receive professional development, resources, guidance, and coaching assistance to implement highly effective civic learning practices in classrooms. The project strengthens existing initiatives, including the Common Core State Standards, the College, Career, and Civic Life C3 Framework for Social Studies State Standards, the Partnership for 21st Century Skills, and of course, the Campaign for the Civic Mission of Schools. This webcast is just one part of a series of professional development modules designed to provide educators with knowledge, skills, and resources to implement this high-quality civic learning in classrooms to prepare all students for college, career, and civic life in the 21st century. The topics of this series include civic learning in California, the California Democracy School Civic Learning Initiative, how to frame a civic inquiry, how to facilitate an investigation, how to conduct civil dialogue about controversial issues using Socratic seminar, how to conduct dialogue about controversial issues using philosophical chairs as a strategy, and how to conduct civil dialogue about controversial issues using the structured academic controversy approach. Another module is how to help students communicate conclusions. Another one explains how to help students take informed action. And finally, we want to share some of the success stories from the field. We want you to hear firsthand from students, teachers, and administrators about the power of civic learning. You can find these modules and all the valuable resources for institutionalizing civic learning at our website you see here, www.lacoe.edu/curriculuminstruction/history social science/California Democracy School. I'd like to begin our discussion with this. What is civic learning and why is it so important? And to help us understand this, I've invited Ted McConnell, the Executive Director of the Campaign for the Civic Mission of Schools based in Washington, D.C. Ted has spent much of his career working in government and politics. He worked on the campaigns of 4 presidents, served as an assistant to the Secretary of Commerce in the Reagan administration, and for former Chief Justice Warren Burger on the Commission of the Bicentennial of the United States Constitution. He has seen front and center how systems of government works and now is dedicated to preserving our democracy for future generations by promoting civic learning in our schools across America. Ted, thanks for joining us today.
Michelle, it is a great pleasure to be here at LACOE today with you and the great teachers of the Los Angeles County Office of Education.
Ted, can you tell us a little bit about the Campaign for the Civic Mission of Schools? What is it and what is the mission?
The Campaign for the Civic Mission of Schools is a coalition of over 60 national organizations committed to reframing education, getting back to the original purpose of education as established over 200 years ago by the founders of our republic, the founders of education in the United States, with a civic purpose. That is to prepare the next generation to be educated and informed citizens, something that in recent decades we've gotten away from, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about. The campaign is co-chaired by Justice Sandra OConnor and former Congressman Lee Hamilton of Indiana. Our coalition includes the teachers' organizations, the NEA, the AFT, the principals' organizations, the full alphabet soup that is the organizations representing educators in our country, plus civic engagement groups such as the League of Women Voters, all dedicated to restoring the essential civic mission of our nation's schools.
Yeah, we are all really impressed with the whole idea of reframing the purpose of education. We're hearing a lot today about the need to prepare students for college and career, but I agree, if we want to preserve the future of our democracy, we need schools to become those guardians of democracy, as the report states, to prepare students for their role as engaged citizens in our republic. So let's take a moment to view the introductory video on your website on the civic mission of schools.
The statistics that we hear are quite startling. A third of the American population cannot name the 3 branches of government. This is pretty stark evidence that we need to commit ourselves to civic education in high school as a required course.
I think civics is misunderstood among Americans mainly because they don't see the connection. Every single act that we do throughout the course of the day, we are affected by government.
Civics is the study of the rights and duties of citizens, and if citizens don't know their rights and duties, then our country can't really function as well as it should.
It's very discouraging because today about half the states have stopped making civics and government a requirement getting through high school. I really am shocked and can't believe that that's happened.
Students definitely need to be made aware of how our democracy works if they're going to affect any sort of change.
A way that I think teachers can probably try to get their kids more involved in government and get their kids more excited in government classes, well, by making it more personal for them, showing them examples of how court case affects their life, and showing them clips from movies or clips from TV shows that they might find interesting that deal with government and civics.
I think when most people hear about civics education or think about civics education, they think of students sitting in a classroom, reading a textbook, learning how a bill becomes a law. And while it is extremely important that we teach our students those things and they have that knowledge base, it's also important to understand that civics education is more than just what you would read in a textbook. Civics education is about producing citizens who are active in their community. We can do that. We can encourage that in a high school classroom. Through volunteer programs, through service learning projects. And when you make civics an elective instead of a required, dedicated course and discipline of study, you miss that.
Every generation of young people in this country has to learn something about how our system works, because they are going to grow up and be the holders in their own hands of making our government work. If they don't know how it works, they are not going to be good citizens.
What a great piece, and how wonderful to see Justice Sandra Day O'Connor as part of the work. She's been a real champion for civic learning, as you know. But tell us a little bit more about Justice O'Connor and what really motivates her. Why is she so passionate about this, Ted?
Justice O'Connor, along again with Congressman Lee Hamilton, co-chair of our campaign, are passionate about this issue because they have seen firsthand the consequences of a lack of a robust civic education provided to students. The judiciary, perhaps, is a canary in the coal mine in terms of they see the consequences when kids make bad decisions. They see the consequences when kids aren't provided a well-rounded civic learning experience. Justice O'Connor has said all across this country, knowledge of our system of government, our rights and responsibilities as citizens of this great republic is not passed down through the gene pool. It must be taught, and we have work to do, we most assuredly do, to provide an adequate civic learning experience to every single school child, not only here in Los Angeles, in California, but across the nation.
Yeah, thank you. And as you know, Ted, civic learning, and in particular, high-quality civic learning, has been interpreted and delivered in a number of different ways. The goal, as you say, is to provide young people with the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to be informed, responsible, and engaged citizens. And according to you, Ted, and the other national experts, tell us a little about what kind of knowledge, skills, and dispositions are we talking about?
In order to be a fully informed citizen, you do have to have a body of civic knowledge. You have to know what level of government handles what potential problem, so that you're not writing to your U.S. congressman if you're dissatisfied with your trash pickup. You have to know a bit of the history of the founding of this country, what the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, those essential charter documents mean to you and to your family. You have to develop civic skills, the ability, again, to discern what level of government handles a problem that you might be concerned about. Another civic skill would be knowing that by working together with like-minded individuals, like-minded citizens, you can make a difference at City Hall, at the State House, and at the congressional federal level. And civic disposition is simply that, a disposition to participate. It's about more than just voting. It's about willing to serve on juries, willing to take responsibility for what happens in your community, caring about what happens in your community, and getting involved.
Yeah, I think of it as a three-legged stool. You can't have engaged, responsible citizens. They don't have that basic knowledge base. They don't have the skills to engage, to work collaboratively, to think critically, and then, of course, the attitude piece.
All too often, we hear about the civic knowledge deficit, and that is concerning. Things like when Jay Leno was on television and he would do his Jay walking episodes, who's the Vice President of the United States, and people would answer Donald Duck, who is not Vice President of the United States. But equally as important is a civic skills deficit and a desire not to be civically engaged rather than the desire to be civically engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that is really critical if we want to do this right. So Ted, tell us a bit more about the Civic Mission of Schools and the Guardian of Democracy report. Why was it written? When was it written? Why it's such an important document to us?
The Civic Mission of Schools report and its follow-on Guardian of Democracy report was issued first in 2003 by the Carnegie Corporation of New York and the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement at then the University of Maryland. The report is the civic learning community and civic engagement community's consensus document on the problems confronting civic education in our country. It contains recommendations for educators, including 6 proven practices on how to do civic learning right in every school in our country. It includes recommendations for policymakers at the local, the state, the federal level. Recommendations that, if followed, would make civic learning come alive in every single school in the country. This is the essential foundational document of our campaign.
We all look to that. I know in all 50 states people are using this to guide their work with policymakers, with educators, people all over dedicated to this cause. So let's talk about these 6 proven practices one at a time because they're important. The first one, really important, is about building that knowledge base for young people. So we need and must have robust classroom instruction in history, geography, economics, law, and government. That has to be front and center. Students must be informed about our nation's history, the way the government works, the rule of law, the founding principles of our American democracy. We can't expect kids to engage in democratic practice if they don't know what it is or how democracy operates.
Absolutely, Michelle. And the second of the 6 proven practices is the opportunity to engage in robust discussions, carefully guided, of contemporary or controversial issues in the classroom. We, I think, all can look around and see the need to be able to discuss controversial issues in a more calm, reasonable and rational manner in our daily lives, this is also a way of making the subject more relevant and more interesting to the students.
And it's a difficult one for classroom teachers. The third practice is about service learning, another great opportunity for students to learn how to solve real community issues and problems in their communities and solutions that can be found in the development or enforcement of public policies to engage in that process to solve problems. Discovering, for example, the many causes of homelessness, learning about the lack of resources for homeless individuals, working with local policymakers to address the problem can really result in some long-term solutions. So going beyond the volunteering can drive or the soup kitchen, but let's work with policymakers to create these long-term solutions. That's the kind of service learning we're talking about, to build that knowledge, skills, and dispositions for young people.
Absolutely, and it should be service learning linked to classroom learning.
Yes.
Picking up trash on the highway is a noble endeavor we should all engage in. But in this context, if it isn't linked back to classroom discussion, classroom learning on the consequences of litter, the environment, it isn't educationally valid. Of course, the fourth proven practice in the Guardian of Democracy, the Civic Mission of School report, is the opportunity to participate in robust extracurricular activities, especially those extracurriculars that have a civic purpose. Organizations such as Junior Statesman, Close Up, the American Legion offers many programs that are extracurricular and allow students the opportunity to develop their civic skills, an essential part of a great civic learning experience.
Yeah, I would agree. One of the fifth proven practice that we talk about a lot is the opportunity for students to participate in the governance of their school. So we know what a classic student government looks like. My son was a student body president at his high school. They were involved in a lot of activities like picking the prom colors or organizing the dance or the multicultural fair, all really great activities and built some powerful skills. But we want to give kids an opportunity to have a say, to have a voice in how their school is governed, how their school district is governed, and being involved in some of those conversations. Terrific experiences.
A great way to capture authentic student voice. And finally, the sixth proven practice is the opportunity to experience simulations of small d democratic processes. You know, if you're studying chemistry, you work in a lab. The same should apply when you're studying civics and government. The opportunity to participate in Model United Nations. Here in California, in the We the People programs, model legislative type programs. The opportunity to take democracy out for a test drive and experience it provides great skill building exercise. So there are our 6 proven practices that we highly recommend every single school in the country employ as part of their approach to civic learning.
And we can start in elementary schools too. Doesn't have to wait till high school. We are talking about all kids at all grade levels. I think that's the goal of the report.
Indeed.
So let's take a moment and invite our viewers to stop the tape and reflect on the discussion thus far. We're going to show a slide here and let you have some time to talk about it. Which of the 6 proven practices exist at your school? What are the benefits of those practices? What are some of the challenges for implementing them? And what can you do to make them available not just for some students, but for all students at your school site? Ted, we've both traveled around the state and around the country. I think we've both seen some great examples of high-quality civic learning in a number of different settings, from kindergarten through high school. But tragically, it's not the norm. It seems to be more the exception. Tell us a little bit, from your point of view, what's the problem? Why aren't we seeing this in all schools?
This is a problem that is many, many decades in making. We historically, and again, the civic mission of schools was a principal animating, driving factor behind the decision to create a system of free, universal public education in our country. Go back and read the Northwest Ordinance from the late 1700s where this is discussed. And we have waxed and waned over the succeeding 200 years in providing good to moderate to sometimes jingoistic type of rah-rah patriotism civic learning. Certainly post-World War II, we were doing a very good job in meeting the knowledge part of our knowledge, skills, and dispositions stool. But I think you can date the decline in the importance of civic learning in our schools to an event that happened in the late 1950s when the then Soviet Union set up a rocket into space with a little tiny ball of a satellite called Sputnik. And we all went into a panic that, my goodness, we aren't competitive anymore. Our schools are not producing students with the capacity to make us competitiveness in technology and science and math, etc. This has begun a long trend, long before the promulgation of the No Child Left Behind version of the Federal Elementary and Secondary Education Act, of a slow, steady decline in the quantity and quality of civic learning afforded to our students. And this has happened at the same time that principally the nonprofit community has developed a wealth of new, marvelous teaching strategies that make the subject come alive for students. I get very angry when I hear anyone blaming frontline teachers or frontline administrators for the problem we have in civic learning in our country. These problems are generally the result of decisions made by policymakers at the state and federal level without thinking of the consequences of their actions. We need a well-rounded education in this country that includes robust civic learning.
Yeah, I would agree. I meet teachers everywhere who really want to do this, but they feel hamstrung. They feel like they don't have permission to do that. So we need our policymakers and school administrators to embrace the importance of this, open the doors, find ways, creative ways for this to occur for all teachers to be able to deliver this for all students.
And have the data showing the decline in student attainment in civic learning.
Exactly. We're going to look at some of that data, then have some conversation about that too.
Good.
The campaign, the National Council for the Social Studies, and all the partner organizations you mentioned are working very hard to reverse this trend. And it's real easy to get discouraged, especially when we see the data that's come out. In the spring of 2015, the National Assessment Governing Board released the results of the National Assessment for Educational Progress, also known as the NAEP scores, for history, geography, and civics. More than 29,000 eighth graders across the country participated in the 2014 NAEP assessments. Each student responded a multiple choice and constructed response open-ended questions in one of the three subjects. U.S. history question measured students' knowledge of American history in the context of four themes: democracy, culture, technology, and world role. Geography questions measured the knowledge of geography in space and place, environment and society, spatial dynamics, and connections. Civics questions measured students' knowledge and skills related to 5 essential content areas about government and society. But sadly, the results are not good. In fact, they're dismal, and they're viewed by many as a national embarrassment. Only 18% of the students assessed in U.S. history scored at proficient or above. For geography, only 27% scored at proficient or above. And in civics, only 23% of students tested scored at proficient or above. What does it say about our students, our schools, and the future of our democracy when roughly 3/4 of students don't even have a proficient knowledge of our nation's past, don't understand how geography impacts our world, or have the basic knowledge and skills to engage in democratic processes that were established by our founding fathers so many years ago? And when we look at the results over time, the findings are even more discouraging. Because despite our very best efforts, and believe me, there's been scores of educators who have been working very hard to adopt and implement outstanding civic learning programs, we're seeing virtually no change in scores for civics since 2010, since 2006, or even since 1998. So we see the scores are not only low, we're seeing very little improvement over time. And when we disaggregate the civic data based on race, ethnicity, gender, the type of school students are enrolled, we find more interesting information. White students increased a score gain of 4 points, but no other group increased scores in 2014 compared to 2010. We see some increases from 1998, but the increases are not evident in all groups. So when we compare scores among students who are white, Hispanic, and Black, in all 3 subjects, which group scored the highest? White students. And not by just a few points, but by wide margins. So now we're seeing achievement gaps. And the achievement gap discussion for U.S. history, geography, and civics leads us to the same discussions we've had when we see evidence of achievement gaps in other subject areas. So Ted, that NAEP data really says a lot. When you saw that and heard about that coming out, what was your reaction? And what was the reaction of the civic learning community when they saw that?
Well, the NAEP scores bear out what we've been talking about. They bear out the stagnation of student attainment in this area. The scores, as you just said, have remained flat since 1998. They bear out what we have been growingly concerned about, this achievement gap and attainment gap between the various population groups, which is not only un-American, undemocratic, it threatens to undermine the very fabric that holds our society together. Those without civic skills speak with a whisper. At the same time, those with great civic knowledge and a big pocketbook speak with a roar.
Yeah, I would agree. We're going to look at some data here in California too, and we were seeing some of those same types of findings. Because when we think about it, which students are more likely to succeed in college, career, and civic life? Which ones are not? But here we're talking about something that's going to directly impact the future of our democracy, as you said, our democratic way of life, the future of America. Which students, when they become independent adults, will be equipped with the knowledge, skills, and dispositions we're talking about, the attitudes to run for public office, to serve responsibly on juries, to watch political ads with a critical eye, it's a big thing right now going on, to know where to go to change a law or policy that affects their lives, or even to vote in elections. So we look at all this craziness we see in political campaigns, and so many people are just swept up into the fray without even contemplating or understanding these different perspectives that are being put before us, and thinking about the implications of each public policy put forth, or even the policymakers who put them in place again. So all very important to think about for all people, all future citizens.
This NAEP data should serve as a wake-up call to every single school board member at the local level, at the state level, every single school administrator. We simply must do better in this area that is, again, foundational to the whole reason we have public education in this country.
I agree. Couldn't agree more. So we want to pause for a moment and let our viewers think about this a little bit, about these NAEP results. What do they mean to you? What's your immediate reaction to these low scores, to the lack of growth over time, and the achievement gaps we're seeing? If students at your school took similar tests to measure their knowledge of U.S. history, geography, and civics, how do you think they would fare? And I want you to talk about and think about, why is this data so important? Let's take a step back right now and look at some data to understand why civic learning is so important. Mira Levinson, professor of education at Harvard University, published a book in 2012 entitled, love this title, No Citizen Left Behind. And she chronicles her experience as a middle school teacher in inner city schools. She talks at length about the gaps in civic learning opportunities for young people. And she cites the election voting rates of all voters in the 2008 national election. And as you can see, 66% of all eligible white voters actually voted. 65% of African American eligible voters voted, 50% Hispanics, 44% Asians. So let's take a look at the voter turnout numbers for middle and upper class citizens and people in poverty. Take a look at the numbers for different educational levels. So based on this census data, we see there were large numbers of voters who simply did not vote. And those that did we find them to be largely from middle and upper class homes. The higher the education level, the higher the likelihood that people came out to the polls. Let's look at the numbers for young voters, ages 18 to 29. Again, we see low voter turnout across the board, lower than the general population. And we also see the same data demonstrating that people with college experience are more likely to vote than those that don't. Dr. Levinson terms this the civic empowerment gap. And since we're looking at voter turnout data for presidential election, let's see what youth voter turnout looked like in the 2012 presidential election from the CIRCLE report. CIRCLE is the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement. It's a nonpartisan, independent academic research center that's part of the Jonathan M. Tisch College of Citizenship and Public Service at Tufts University. And as you can see, 45% of young people, ages 18 to 29, voted in 2012, down from 51% in 2008. And when we look at the midterm elections, the news is no better. Now, we all know that presidential elections tend to draw more eligible voters out to the polls, but these congressional elections also have a huge impact on our everyday lives. Here we see again in the report from CIRCLE that the 2014 youth voter turnout was the lowest ever recorded for a midterm election. Similarly, youth voter registration was also the lowest ever recorded. So who are these young voters and non-voters? CIRCLE released a report in 2011, Understanding a Diverse Generation, Youth Civic Engagement in the United States, describes the full spectrum of youth engagement in 2010. They conclude that the millennial generation should not be treated as a uniform group, but is extraordinarily heterogeneous when it comes to their levels and types of civic engagement, as you can see in the diagram. Looking at the turquoise section, we see that over 23% of youth are considered civically alienated. They didn't vote, they didn't volunteer, belong to any groups, participate in any local civil society activities. And who are they? Well, a majority held a high school diploma or less. Only 10% were college graduates. Majority of them were people of color. In contrast, the broadly engaged cluster, you see, 21%, and the political specialist cluster, 18%, were extremely engaged in civic life. And who are they? Predominantly white and college educated. And then there are the talkers, the donors, and the undermobilized. These groups have some interests, but do not actively engage in civic life. Lost opportunities, to be sure. Ted, this is important data to look at as well, this voter turnout issue with young people. Is this what you're seeing out there? You've been involved in politics a long time, working on a number of political campaigns. Has it always been like this? Is this something new or is it a trend? What's your reaction to that?
Sadly, it's a trend. When the 18 to 20-year-olds were first given the vote, of course, the first national election they could vote in was 1972, which was a landslide election. President Nixon defeated Senator McGovern. There was an overwhelming rush amongst young people to vote in the 1972 election, and we've seen a steady decline in this cohort's voting in every single, both off-election and presidential election since, with the exception of 2008. But there was a candidate running in 2008 who energized and excited the youth vote. Of course, in 2012, we saw another drop-off in the youth vote for whatever reason. Voting is the tip of the iceberg in being a responsible, informed, civically engaged participant in our republic. There are a variety of new modern teaching strategies, tools that educators can bring into the classroom that will encourage young people to register and to get out and vote. And I, for one, support the notion of perhaps even lowering the voting age so that we can capture high school students while they're in high school, get them registered, help them develop the habit of being an informed voter.
Now let's take a look at some other data from a study done closer to home here in California. This study, conducted by Dr. Joseph Kahn at Mills College, focused on the civic learning opportunities that are available to students during their high school career. Dr. Kahn and his team focused on 7 schools, 7 different school districts in California. He involved 435 students from very diverse backgrounds and schools, and they followed the students for 3.5 years. A lot of work, big study. The study revealed what we have long known. There's a genuine lack of opportunities for students to engage in high-quality civic learning experiences. Of the students studied, 34% of them admitted they'd never participated in a service learning experience in high school. 36% of them said they'd never participated in a civic learning simulation. And we know how important these can be. Mock trials, mock elections, simulated congressional hearings are very powerful learning experiences for young people. About 2/3 of the students surveyed said they learned a lot about the structure and function of government. And well, since all 12th graders are required to take a 1-semester government class, that statistic's not too surprising, although we would probably expect to see that number to be higher. But I think the most telling and probably the most critical statistic is that last one that states that less than half the students, 46%, were in classes where a wide range of views were discussed. To understand, respect, and discuss multiple perspectives on issues is probably the most important element needed for citizens to be informed, engaged, and responsible members of our society. I remember my own mother telling me as a young child, and even as a teenager, if your friends tell you to jump off a cliff, are you going to do it? It's easy to laugh that off, but how many of our friends, family members, and work colleagues do what we see following political candidates like sheep without thoroughly examining the implications of their actions and considering alternative solutions to problems? Being an informed citizen means exactly that, being informed of all the positions and points of view that exist before making a decision. Having those opportunities to dialogue, not debate, but dialogue with others about different points of view, about controversial subjects, needs to be a fundamental component of every young person's education. And school is the ideal setting for this to occur. But when less than half our student body has that opportunity, we know we got some work to do. Dr. Kahn and his team proceeded to disaggregate his data by socioeconomic status, race, and ethnicity. And again, like in the NAEP data, when compared to students with average or moderate socioeconomic status, students with high socioeconomic status were twice as likely to discuss how laws are made, more likely to participate in service learning. Students from high socioeconomic backgrounds were 1.5 times as likely to engage in a debate or discussion of a controversial issue. And when compared to white students, African American students reported that they were enrolled in less civically oriented government classes. They were involved in fewer discussions of controversial issues and current events, and the climate of their classrooms were less open. Similarly, Latino students reported fewer opportunities for service learning, had fewer experience with role plays and simulations, and experienced less open classroom climates than their white counterparts. So you can see, it's pretty obvious that we're not only seeing low civic engagement across the board, we're also seeing huge gaps between different groups. Which groups are participating in democratic life and which ones are not? So Ted, obviously you know the work of Joe Kahn, and his research that we just discussed revealed the same kind of findings we saw in NAEP here in California. Tell us about your reaction to that, particularly this achievement gap issue that is here now in California in his data, like we saw in the NAEP findings.
Well, the civic opportunity achievement gap, learning gap exists all over the country, not just here in California. This threatens to disenfranchise wide swaths of our population by denying them the knowledge, the skills, and the disposition that, as we've talked about, is so essential to being an informed, engaged citizen. If you go to a school, inner city, rural, that is struggling under the strictures of No Child Left Behind, and of course we're taping this on the actual day where Congress is debating the reauthorization of the Elementary Secondary Education Act, so hopefully we will no longer have to say No Child Left Behind anymore. But if you go to a school that's facing what's called annual yearly progress in math or reading under No Child Left Behind, you're not getting any civic learning in the main. You're being drilled during your school hours on those subjects that the school is failing on. Now, we've got to ensure that every kid graduates high school prepared to go on with a base of knowledge in mathematics and in English that will help them be successful. But only a certain number of kids are going to use that math, they're going to use that English day to day in their careers. I submit they will all be citizens, and we need to be concerned what sort of civic learning preparation have they had. We cannot allow the gains from the 1950s to now in education, particularly in civic education, where we brought up populations that weren't getting this essential part of a well-rounded education. We cannot allow those gains to be lost through concentrating on a few subjects over all others for vulnerable population groups. This is something that should concern everyone.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think most people would agree that No Child Left Behind was very well intentioned, revealed some important data and gaps that need to be addressed. But as we know, one of the unintended consequences was this lack of attention to the social studies, civics in particular. And I think the data we've seen in NAEP and with Joe Kahn's work here in California reveals that.
Here's further evidence.
Yes.
The Center for Educational Progress, a great education think tank in Washington, D.C., from 2003 to 2010, put out an annual study tracking the amount of time afforded to each of the big four subjects, math, English, science, and the social studies. They found at the elementary level, on average, 30 minutes plus per week were cut from the social studies to make more room for instruction in math and English. This is counterproductive to the future of our country.
And the timing is right now, and I know you're working hard with this ESEA reauthorization to make sure that social studies and civics are not left behind again. So we have the data to show, we have an opportunity with federal policy and legislation, and of course states can do the same. So I'm pretty hopeful. We're sort of at a turning point here. Your leadership, your great work, the work that's going on in so many schools that are championing this, I think some things may change, and we want to be a part of that and support teachers in those efforts.
And certainly here in California, the work of Chief Justice Cantel Sakayui, joined by Superintendent Torlakson, this task force that you're a member of, chaired by Justice Judith McConnell of San Diego and my good buddy, great school superintendent Dave Gordon out of Sacramento, you are providing the opportunity for every single school district in this great golden state to improve its approach to civic learning and improve each child's chances of being an informed and engaged citizen.
Yeah, we're going to talk some more about that in the broadcast a little bit. But yeah, there's some things moving, and it's exciting to be a part of it. And you've been a great resource for that as well. Because if we truly believe in we the people in today's world is truly to mean all the people, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, disability, religion, or sexual orientation, are all people of the U.S. being represented in the political spectrum. So it's a much bigger implication here that we're talking about. Are all voices represented when we see what's going on in our government circles? And most importantly, are all young people from all groups being prepared, this is what we're about, to participate in our democratic society as thoughtful, responsible, and engaged citizens? It's a lot of good work that's going on. So we want to take a moment now to pause the broadcast and give you a moment to reflect on these big ideas and important implications of the civic opportunity gap that exists in our nation, in our schools, and in our state. Why do you think it's important for all people to be engaged in democratic practices? Let's look at the big picture here. What needs to be done to prepare all our students at all grade levels for civic life? And again, take a moment to think about and talk with your colleagues. What can be done at your school to provide civic learning opportunities for all students to help close this civic achievement gap? It's important. Take some time, all the time you need, to talk through these big ideas. There's some good news. We have seen some positive signs in many states. Illinois has recently passed legislation requiring high school students to engage in a civics course that includes discussion of controversial issues, service learning, simulations, many of the things we saw in the 6 proven practices that we discussed earlier. And here in California, some things are moving forward here too, that Ted referenced earlier. Our California Chief Justice, Tani Canto-Sakaue, who serves as the Chief of the California Supreme Court, Chair of the Judicial Council, and the head of the judicial branch, has been a champion for us here in the Golden State. Realizing that the judicial branch, one of the 3 branches of government in our American democracy, cannot function properly if the populace does not understand, respect, or fulfill their duty as citizens to uphold the rule of law, has really motivated her to take the lead. The chief established the California Task Force on K-12 Civic Learning with State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson. The task force, co-chaired by Dave Gordon, Superintendent of Schools at the Sacramento County Office of Education, and the Honorable Judith McConnell, Administrative Presiding Justice in the 4th Appellate District Court of Appeal, brought together a number of stakeholders to serve as the task force. Members of the task force included representatives from the California School Boards Association, PTA, AXA, California Chamber of Commerce, State Bar, and many, many other powerful groups and stakeholders. A number of civic learning organizations were also invited to serve as advisory members to the task force. This important work began in 2013 with the realization that the only time civics is a required course of study in California is that 12th grade, 1-semester government course. Civic learning was not being tracked or assessed and had very little attention in our California history social science standards. Our standards have not been updated since 1998. Well, after a number of task force meetings and focus group meetings up and down the state, the task force revealed compelling recommendations to elevate the status of civic and learning and engagement for every student in California. They realized that in order to be effective, actions needed to be taken in the areas of curriculum and instruction, professional learning, assessment, accountability systems, and also the building of community and business partnerships. The first, and probably I think the most important recommendation, is to revise the California History Social Science Standards and Framework to emphasize civic learning in every grade, beginning in kindergarten. The task force also wants to see civic learning integrated into the state assessment and accountability system for students, schools, and districts. Wishing and hoping for civic learning to occur does not always make it happen. Elevating it to the same status as English language arts, mathematics, and science gives civic learning the respect it deserves in every child's education. And in order for teachers to be equipped to provide high-quality civic learning for students, the task force realized that professional learning experiences and an articulated sequence of instruction also need to be provided. And of course, the civic learning should draw on the work of the research-based 6 proven practices of the Guardian of Democracy report. But it needs to go beyond textbook learning, but include opportunities for students to engage in action-oriented, project-based, hands-on civic activities. The task force also recognized the need for students and teachers to reach out to community members and work with civic leaders to engage in real civic learning activities that result in real change in communities, not just simulations. They also paid a great deal of attention to the newly established local control funding formula that calls upon districts to submit local control accountability plans that outlines budgets for state funds to schools. A white paper contained in the task force report offers suggestions for allocating LCAP funds to support civic learning in those schools. The task force report of recommendations was launched in August 2013 to a packed crowd in Sacramento. Let's take a look at a video from that historic day.
What a fantastic day it is today. When I learned that we would collaborate to create a report in 1 year, I was skeptical of what could come out in a year, knowing how difficult this task would be. Because this is no ordinary report. This is an extraordinary report that brings together multiple disciplines, but particularly the legal and educational disciplines. This is how we teach young people to understand the world around them. And by understanding the world around them and how decisions are made and how we function, means that we are growing leaders.
We've lost the practice of teaching students how to be involved in government, of what it means to be participatory, to have debate, to be able to speak civilly with one another, to be engaged, thoughtful citizens, to respect one another. So now, to be able to help students understand the structure of government and how when they grow up, they can participate not only through voting, but also coming to board meetings, coming to their locally elected officials and telling them about problems that they have and they want to solve them. And so through that process, we have teachers that have come in and they've been able to work with the students, and they've practiced what it means to do mock elections, mock trials, spend time doing civil debate so that they understand the issues and take those critical thinking skills and use them in society and use them in their classroom to talk about controversial issues in a way that everyone has a better understanding and sees an opportunities to be able to be the solution to some of the social ills that are happening. And that's our goal as we work with our students, is to be able to give them that knowledge and experience so that when they come out of high school, they're adequately prepared to be thoughtful citizens and to participate in government and be voting active citizens to learn about the issues and then take part in them.
My name is Michael Lundgren. I'm the principal of Bellflower High School in Bellflower, California. Where we want to go with this is getting the student engaged, getting that hook, whatever it is that excites that student about the process of government, and letting them do the inquiry. Instead of the teacher being the provider of the information, let the student do the investigation. Let the student dig deep and find out, well, what is the fact on this? I thought it was this, but my research is telling me no, maybe it might be something else. So it's gone from the teacher being the bearer of all the knowledge to the student inquiring and going out and finding that knowledge.
When my colleagues in the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade get my students, they're already familiar with the process. They're familiar with investigating topics of their interest, in having civil dialogue about controversial issues, and then they're willing to take some sort of action on something that they're passionate about. I think what makes it so interesting is that it does tie our content standards to the new Common Core and allows students freedom to choose topics of interest that they can invest in and that they can investigate and that they can take action on.
The project was the Civic Initiative project, which was we were supposed to pick a topic. We could pick anything, and we had to research the topic, maybe show some graphs and stuff, and then we had to show what kind of initiative we were taking. And so I started a Twitter campaign and a hashtag, and it got a bunch of retweets and a bunch of favorites, so people were seeing it, so it was cool.
My project was on discrimination against the mentally and intellectually disabled, and I touched base about different places they're discriminated and how, like education, home life. My teacher one day, she brought up how everything's not black and white. Nothing's just yes and just no. There's always different aspects to everything. And so to get deeper into that, you have to do research get your own opinion, get your own ideas.
The democracy of us having to put our own say in our 2 cents it's very I think it's good for schools, for teenagers, because most of us want to be heard. When someone's willing to listen, then we're going to speak up and we're going to start making changes.
It's a different type of learning, I've heard them say. It's brought up things they haven't thought about, multiple perspectives. Again, they like hearing from other classmates on their opinions, and eye-opening, I think, would be the proper phrase for that.
I really enjoyed it. I like how we got to speak our minds and show what we learned.
I think inform them. Just tell your friends what's going on, you know. A lot of them have no idea.
Our leaders tomorrow, future governor of this state, is in middle school or high school right now, and they need to be educated into how the democracy of this country works.
Once the report was published, the task force disbanded and the work to implement the recommendations fell to the Power of Democracy Steering Committee. 6 regions, Alameda, Butte, Fresno, Los Angeles, Sacramento, and San Diego, have established coalitions that include members of the judiciary and representatives from the business and education communities to move civic learning forward for all students in all schools in those regions. Let's watch another video that highlights the work of the task force and the Power of Democracy Steering Committee.
We're raising citizens here. We're not just teaching them how to read and write, we need to teach them how to apply it. So teaching them about what's going on in the world, what are the problems, what is important to them, and what the best way that they think to solve those problems are.
This initiative has really prioritized current events in classroom curriculum, experiential learning. Students are engaging in mock debates, mock trials, and they're talking about issues that are relevant and current and accessible to their lives.
You have to show students that their knowledge needs to become hands-on and that they need to apply what they've learned in school to improving the world around them, making the world economically better, socially better, politically better for everybody.
Students learn that they have the ability to change the community around them, which is something that as high school students we sometimes feel powerless to do.
In the early 90s, I participated in a civic learning program, and because of that program, I could envision myself as a leader in the Latino community. If students don't have access to rich civic learning environments, the majority have deferred the ability to really change their lives. The mission of the California Task Force on K-12 civic learning is about empowering students with the tools that they need to change their lives and to change their communities. So this initiative, in some ways, is about social change and about empowering these students. Ultimately, the task force is working towards a report in 2014, which will lead to further discussions, dialogues, and investment throughout the state on civics learning.
We've got to bring back a system which steeps young people in the importance of participating in our democracy.
It's about setting them up to participate, to make change, to have access.
I want students to learn and be great readers and great writers, but what's most important to me is that they go out into the world and become good citizens.
This is our vision for students who are not just prepared for college and career, but who will also make an impact in their communities.
So I hope you can see there's a lot of great momentum led by high-ranking government officials, educators, and members of the general public dedicated to preparing the next generation of citizens to be informed, responsible, and engaged in our democratic way of life. We hope that by participating in these online professional development modules and accessing some of the many resources that exist in the educational community, you'll be able to equip your students with the knowledge, skills, and dispositions they need to become the next generation of citizens in our American democracy. And I want to thank you, Ted, for joining us today to deepen our discussion about the urgency of the problem, the need, and the solutions to what we can do in California and in every state to prepare all students to fully engage as responsible citizens of our democratic way of life.
Thank you, Michelle. We, with the Campaign for the Civic Mission of Schools and our various state partners, such as the Power of Democracy Task Force here in California, will do all we can to sweep away the policy impediments that prevent you from providing the civic learning experience you want to for the kids in your classroom. Now it's up to you. It's up to you, educators of LACOE and of Los Angeles and of California, to ensure that you do your part to restore the civic mission of schools, and it's up to administrators to work with you to ensure that that happens. You're very, very fortunate to have the very best history social science consultant in the country in Dr. Michelle Herzog right here in Los Angeles, and the great resources of LACOE available to you. Take advantage of that and ensure that every single one of your students acquire the civic knowledge, skills, and disposition Michelle and I have been discussing.
Thank you, Ted. That was very nice. But it really is a team effort. There's a whole lot of folks working hard behind the scenes. And I just need to thank so much how fortunate I am to be here at LACOE. I want to thank the wonderful crew here, led by Tyler Cook and Jeff Reyna and the great crew here to helping us put these productions together. And of course, my own division of Curriculum and Instructional Services, which is now led by Yvonne Contreras. So it's a team effort. It's great to have the support, and we're very excited about what we can do and what you can do in your schools to really prepare your young people to be engaged, responsible citizens of our American democracy. So thank you for all you do.